Good day, everyone. Today, we have got the pleasure to introduce Sudipta Ghosh, Partner, Data and Analytics Leader, and Industrial Products Leader, PwC India. With offices in 155 countries and more than 284,000 people, PwC is among the leading professional services networks in the world. At PwC Data and Analytics Practice, they help customers build new solutions and digital assets to keep them ahead of the curve. The practice promotes a culture of data-driven problem solving and innovation and facilitates the adoption of new tools and technologies by clients. It also allows clients to experience prototypes that can be built quickly using reusable tools, accelerators, and reference models available, requiring minimum investment on their part. Welcome to the studio, Sudipta.
Thank you.
Thank you very much for accepting our invitation. We are here today to talk about how you are helping customers solve their analytics problems and be a catalyst to their growth. So let's start. So based on your experience, could you tell us about the typical challenges faced during an analytics project?
Of course, that's a great question, and thanks for asking that. So typically, as you know, most of the analytics projects start with a very high degree of expectation because most of these projects are either related to revenue enhancement or efficiency improvement or risk management, and which are very, very CXO type of issues. And hence, there is a huge amount of expectation from such projects across the board. And hence, it's very important that this gap is always managed. In fact, to start with, there should not be any gap between what you deliver and what was the expectation at the beginning of the project. But if at all there is a gap, how do we strive towards minimizing that gap? Because it's very important that when you are embarking on a journey in analytics, and if there is a very huge difference between what you are seeing and what you had expected at the beginning, that kind of kills all initiatives. So what I would recommend are 4 things in order to address this challenge. The first one is appropriate and regular communication with the key stakeholders. This is extremely important. And I have chosen my words very carefully. Appropriate and regular, both are very important. So you need to provide the right amount of communication, right level of communication, and also right frequency of communication with the key stakeholders. And when I'm saying key stakeholders, it is not just related to people who are working in the project. It is also very important that who are the recipients of benefits of this solution. We need to also keep them in confidence. And the more you talk, the more you openly communicate, you are always giving them the picture of what is happening now, and hence you can completely manage this gap if at all there is any gap. The second thing which I generally recommend is that there is a difference between implementing a transactional system and implementing an analytics solution.
Absolutely.
Say for example, if you implement an ERP system, right? Now, if you implement an ERP system, people will have to use it, because if you don't use it, you cannot run your transactions and your business will come to a standstill, right?
Correct.
But that is not the case with analytics projects. You can build a very fantastic dashboard or a report, but if people are not using it, they can continue to run their business anyways, because it's just an aid in the decision-making process. So what is very critical is that, particularly for analytics projects, right from the very beginning, a well thought through strategy of change management and adoption is very critical.
Correct.
Adoption is one of the most important things where we see organizations fail to reap the proper benefits. And this cannot be an afterthought. This cannot be thought after you have built a solution and you have delivered the solution. This has to be done right at the beginning, involving with your stakeholders in a very, very structured and methodical manner. The third thing which I talk about is more around the fact that there are always risks associated with either the data or the technology or the process. And I'll give you a few examples. Yeah. Technology, as you know, we always depend on technology for delivering analytics projects. And when I'm talking about technology, I'm actually talking about 4 types of technologies. I'm talking about data ingestion or data integration, data storage, data modeling, and presentation of data. All these 4 sets are building blocks from a technology perspective, and handshaking of these technology components becomes absolutely critical. And if there is any glitch anywhere, then obviously you will not be able to deliver what you wanted to do. So you need to call out those risks early on. Data risk. Data risk is a big risk. You have created a whole edifice of number of use cases, but when you finally find out what your source systems have, you find that there are data gaps. Data is either not captured, or the quality of the data is not right, or it is inconsistent, or it is not coming with the right level of granularity, or the frequency of the data at which it is getting refreshed is not going to be very helpful because it is not real time. So all of that has to be called out from a data perspective. And last but not the least is the process by which you are actually deploying the solution in the environment, the process by which you are managing the change through the or changing the application, the process by which you are engaging the stakeholders and getting the requirements. All of that needs to be very carefully managed. So these three elements are critical. And last but not the least, which is actually very, very important, is to develop a learning mindset. A learning mindset means that you are able to learn from failures rather than banishing and not doing anything after you have had the first failure. And it is all about a mindset thing. If your first project fails, doesn't mean that's the end of the world. It actually means that you have learned one way how not to do things, and that learning mindset, which is inculcated over a period of time, helps you to then have not just realistic expectations, but also you can actually exceed your expectation because you're constantly learning and figuring out how to do things better, faster, cheaper, and in a more efficient manner.
Let me shift the gear a bit. And you also just briefly put this point across, where the importance of data in any analytics project, right? So how do we ensure that the people who are sharing the data with us, it could be data stewards or from the business in analyst community, from the customer, as well as the people who are a part of the project, understand the data the way it needs to be understood, right? Both the parties see the same things when they see the data. So how do we ensure that, Sudipta, according to you?
Absolutely. So I think this is one of the most least understood points. When people talk about analytics, they think that I'm going to have a very fancy AI-based algorithm and do something very magical.
Correct.
But believe me, what happens is that 80% or maybe 85% of the time is spent on understanding, messaging, and managing the data. And only
Absolutely.
after you have done that well, the rest of the 15% is the cherry on the top, where you are either
Correct.
building a very sophisticated ML model, or you're trying to do something new and getting this results right. So it is almost like an iceberg, where that 80% which is, or 85% which is below the surface of the water, is effectively your effort, your heavy duty effort on
Right.
understanding your data and managing and messaging your data. And I think that is fundamental to any successful analytics project. And in fact, what we also say is that because the complexity of the data, both from the perspective of variety, we are talking about data which is unstructured, we are talking about data which is text, data which is images, in fact
Correct.
now data which is also sound, right?
Yes.
So you have a huge variety of data which you currently using. Also, the volume of the data is immense. So you're talking about terabytes, petabytes of data. And then the data is coming very fast if you're talking about sensor-based data, which is continuously emitting all the parameters from a machine equipment perspective. So all of this makes it very, very complex for human beings to understand what is going on in the data. And I
True.
always recommend that you spend good amount of time, forget about all the models and everything else, just try and understand what the data is about, what the
Correct.
data is telling
Very,
you,
very
what are
important.
the
Yes.
fields, what are the definitions, how the data is connected with each other, what is the data telling you. And this is entirely the world of exploratory data analysis, which
Correct.
is extremely important, understated, understood, but extremely, extremely important, because until and unless you have a handle on what the data is, you
Yes.
cannot really proceed to the next steps, right? Now,
Absolutely. Yeah.
the next thing after you have done this exploration of the data and understanding of the data, comes the next question, that can you identify if there are any gaps in the data? Are there any inaccuracies in the data? Are there any inconsistencies in the data? And whether you are having the right data set for you to take the right decisions, right? So you spend that time in terms of data profiling and data quality, and do not underestimate that effort. There are specialized tools available which
Correct.
helps you to understand the entire quality aspect of the data, and we need to spend that time to understand the data extremely well. And the last but not the least thing, particularly for machine learning based project, is to understand if there are any inherent biases in the data. Now,
Yes. Right.
inherent bias doesn't mean that your data is incorrect or inaccurate. Inherent biases will mean that are there any factors which could have crept into the model without your own understanding and
Right.
would have a potential to influence the result. And this is
Yes.
not that easy, but at
Yes.
least if you are aware that you are looking for some kind of a bias, at least keeps you open. And this bias thing is another unknown, which I was
Yes.
talking about in the previous
Hmm.
answer, where you look at if there is something which is going to make you blindsided and you are not going to pick that up easily, right? So all the three things: exploration of the data, figuring out the gaps in the data, and looking for inherent biases in the data are three critical aspects, after which you can say that you have understood the data well and now you are able to build the model and the analysis on top of it.
Absolutely, Sudipta. Yes. So, those points on the importance of data understanding is so critical. And also, this is not one of the glamorous jobs, right? This whole data engineering. You will not get those colorful, visuals, all those dashboards. So it's understated and super duper important. Absolutely agree with you. Now, on this part of understanding the data, right? We always, you may have come across this hard data like revenue, sales, cost kind of things, and also there is this soft data, right? There's a subject matter expert. He has on the ground knowledge and he has some opinions about the data. And also there could be responses coming from surveys, questionnaires, and also any video clips or audio that you want to combine. So how do we ensure that our analytics is comprehensive enough to carry both the set of data?
Absolutely, a great question there. And the way I divide the world of data in the analytics projects is what I call it as hard data and soft data. And I'll explain to you what I mean by that.
Hmm.
A hard data is all about the facts, the
Hmm.
revenue numbers, the sales numbers, the cost, and all of that which you get from the transactional system, another system, and all of that, right? That's the hard data with you. The soft data is all about opinions, point of views, slightly more unstructured, what your people are telling about, etc. And I call that soft data is primarily because these are all pretty much views which people are expressing about
Right.
something, which may not
Correct.
necessarily be right, but it is right from their individual perspective,
Hmm.
right? So you have this objective data and subjective data, or
Right.
hard data and soft data, right?
Hmm.
And I think what happens usually is that we focus a lot more on hard data and we
Correct.
sometimes ignore the soft data completely when we are building models. And I
Right.
can tell you a few examples. So for example, if you have built a correlation between two variables,
Hmm.
that a particular consumer would buy more if you are pricing the product a little cheaper.
Hmm.
Suppose
Hmm.
that is your hypothesis, and
Hmm.
then you have created a big model which allows you to have those growth projections because you have figured out the price elasticity of demand and all that, right?
Hmm. Hmm. Hmm.
But until and unless you actually interview the consumer, ask
Right.
one or two questions that are you looking for a cheaper product, or you're looking for a product which is more beneficial to you, or is there a third dimension, you will never be able to figure out whether the correlation which you have figured out from your hard data is actually the same thing which the way it is being perceived by your customer, or the customer is perceiving completely different things and your model is not in sync with what is going on in the mind of a customer, right? So that is where you try to bridge the gap between what your data is telling and what your customers are telling in this specific example, right? So
Yes.
primary survey, diagnostic questionnaires,
Hmm.
figuring out the cause and effect relationships, figuring out the inherent, these are all very critical aspects which help you to formulate your hypothesis in a sharp manner, and then you can test your hypothesis with the hard data. Also, one more important factor is
Yeah.
that when you get the soft data, you are actually indirectly telling your stakeholders that I'm interested in you. I really
Correct.
want you to have the
So very
right
right.
outcome.
Yes. Yes.
I really care about your feedback and your point of view. And that magically improves the adoption of such solutions, both in the
Absolutely.
organization as well as outside the organization. So that's another spillover effect which comes in when you are able to combine both these aspects of the data.
Correct. So we are now almost coming to the end of this discussion. I would have really loved that it lasted longer, but as we we just have to put a timeline. It's a wonderful discussion so far. So thank you very much for this insightful discussion, Sudipto. So the points that you made on some of the key challenges, how do we handle, particularly the unknowns, and also the importance of the soft data actually are some of the key insights, at least for me, based on this discussion. Thank you very much for your chat. Okay, all the very best for solving customers' data analytics problems and helping them grow continuously. So hoping to see you again in
Thank,
another segment. Thanks a lot again, Sudipta. Great time with you.
no, thank you very much, Jayaram. Absolutely a pleasure chatting with you.
Yes.
And thank you for having this insightful conversation.
Yeah. Thanks. Thanks a lot, Sudipta. Have a great day.